Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Ladies and gentlemen, dear colleague, friends of Dar, good evening and very warm welcome to Dar al-Athar al-Islamiyah. It's always an honor for us to host a gathering to celebrate a rich and diverse legacy of Islamic civilization. It gives me a great pleasure to introduce our esteemed speaker, Professor C.Schultz, and leading scholars in field of Islamic history. Dr. Schultz received his Ph.D. in Islamic History from University of Chicago in 1995 and is currently a professor in History of Department at DePaul University in Chicago. Over the years, he has had several academic leadership roles, including Chair of History Department and Associate Dean of College of Liberal Arts. Professor Schultz is widely recognized for his expertise in monetary and economic history of Mamluk sultans of Egypt and Syria. His body of work includes many scholarly chapters and articles that have contributed significantly to our understanding of the economic structures and coin systems of the Mamluk period. Tonight, Dr. Schultz will present a lecture titled The Mamluk Sultans and the Three Dars, the Dar al-Salam, the Dar of al-Darb, and the Dar al-Athar al-Islamiyah in Kuwait. In his presentation, he will explore the significance of Mamluk coins as a source of understanding the social and economic history of the sultans, from its place within the border, economic marketplace of the Islamic Middle Period and recent findings on copper coins. His talk will guide us through the complex evaluation of the Mamluk currency. Please join me to welcoming Professor Warren Schultz.
Good evening. Welcome. It is so great to be here, and I'd like to say right off the bat that I don't think I brought the sand with me. It is wonderful to be back at the Dar al-Athar al-Islamiyah again, and I'd like to thank Her Excellency Sheikh Sabah for the kind invitation to appear here tonight. Tonight I will highlight the importance of the Mamluk Sultanate in history briefly, and then move to Mamluk coinage in the wider context of the complicated monetary history of the Mediterranean region, and finally discuss the importance of the collection of Mamluk coins held here at the Dar. My lecture consists, therefore, of three parts of increasing length. First, we have a brief historical refresher. The importance of the Mamluk Sultanate of Egypt and Syria is evident to any observer of the history of the Dar al-Islam. Our understanding of this crucial state is made possible by the richest source base available to scholars of any pre-Ottoman Islamic state, as the collections of Mamluk objects here in the Dar and elsewhere bear witness. Mamluk-era texts and items of material culture survive in great numbers, and these sources have driven the growth of the field of Mamluk studies over the past few decades. In particular, and for the purposes of this presentation, it is important to note that the surviving numismatic evidence from the Sultanate is remarkable, not just in the number of surviving specimens, but in the many varieties of different coin types as well. And in this vocabulary, a coin type is a unique combination of date, mint city, design, metal, and name of the Sultan which appears on it, if any. The Mamluk Sultanate is frequently credited in history textbooks around the world, I think, with the role of the defender of the Western Dar al-Islam at a critical moment. This is based primarily upon two achievements of the Mamluk Sultanate. The first was their elimination of the last Crusader states from the Levantine coast. And the second is that it was the Mamluks who halted the Mongol westward advance into the Dar al-Islam. First at Ain Jalut, in good Egyptian fashion, Ain Galut, in 658-1260, and subsequently they maintained that eastern border with the Ilkhanids, although there were some invasions, until that Mongol state fell into disarray in the early 7th, 14th century. Now, there is so much more that could be said about all of this, but let us move to the second part of my talk, the Mamluk Sultanate and the Dar al-Darb. Since the right to mint coins, sikka, in one's own name was a prerogative of rule within the Dar al-Islam, the early Mamluk sultans immediately did so, mint coins that is. And of course they minted their coins in the Dar al-Darb, the mint, sometimes referred to as the Dar sikka. While we tend to think of mints today as monumental buildings with high security, they could also be small workshops, albeit with high security. This map shows the location of the 6 main Mamluk mints, mint cities, I should say. Where the actual mints were in these cities is a matter of it's not exactly clear. Cairo and Alexandria were the leading mint cities in Egypt, and Damascus, Aleppo, Hama, and Tripoli were the mint cities in Bilad Sham. In addition, on occasion, Mamluk coins were minted in other locations, such as at Markab Castle and the city of Latakia. Furthermore, there are Mamluk coins that do not bear a mint name at all. And finally, some of the vassals, particularly in the Anatolian region, acknowledged Mamluk suzerainty on their own coins. Mamluk coins did not spring out of thin air or sandy air. They emerged from the minting traditions of the Ayyubid Confederation, which preceded them. On this slide, we have 4 examples of Ayyubid coins: a gold coin of al-Adil Abu Bakr, a copper coin of al-Kamil Muhammad. These don't bear a mint name, but they were definitely minted in Egypt. These were minted in Cairo. A silver dirham of al-Kamil Muhammad minted in Damascus, and a silver dirham of al-Nasir Yusuf from Aleppo. To make a very long story short about Ayyubid coins, by the end of the Ayyubid period, it is clear that coins minted in the precious metals of gold and silver circulated by weight and not by count. You will find a very efficient statement of this, for example, in a 1987 publication from the Dar itself. This meant that the total weight of the coins changing hand is what determined value, not the number of coins. We know this primarily because the individual coin weights varied so much. There are dozens, if not hundreds, of surviving examples of some of these coins, and they can weigh anywhere from less than a gram to more than 4 or 5. In the case of dirhams, and from 1 gram to 7 or 8 or 9 grams in the gold coins. Clearly, they could not have been used by count because everyone would have selected the heavier coins. In fact, it's best to think of these coins not in a denominational sense, but the words of dirham and dinar is sort of a generic name for a coin of silver and a coin of gold. And in fact, it's also useful to think of these coins as mini ingots, little ingots of the bullion rather than some sort of precise coin. This practice of minting coins as small ingots continued well into the Mamluk period. Changes did not come until the beginning of the 9th, 15th century, as will be described below. I will postpone the discussion of copper coins until much later. So this next slide here is a sort of a collage of Mamluk coins. The underneath, the base photograph underneath, the black and white photo, is actually a photo of a hoard of early Mamluk dirhams discovered in an excavation in Kerak in 1963. Layered on top of it are a series of Mamluk coins of different metals and different types. I offer them here as just a hint of the wide variety of Mamluk coins that are out there. Here we have a large gold ingot-style dirham from the reign of Faraj. Here we have a gold dirham of Qaitbay, and no, this is an Ashrafi of Barzbay, and here is the later smaller gold coin, an early silver coin that looks very Ayyubid in style from the 1250s, and then of course a silver dirham of Zahir Baybars with the famous lion at the bottom, and this other silver coin is a reform effort from the reign of al-Muwayyad Sheikh. The reasons for these coins will become clear in just a few minutes. I also wanted to show you a couple examples of Syrian fulūs from the 8th, 14th century, various styles, frequently with interesting animal figures or interesting patterns. Here is a late 13th century coin from Lajin with this nice circle with two lines across it. And this last one here is a coin I will talk about in a few minutes. Mamluk coins, in terms of visual appearance, the first Mamluk dinars looked a lot like the Ayyubid dinars, such as the coin of Abu Bakr II seen previously. They contain several lines of script in the central field, surrounded by a linear border and a marginal inscription. The first major change in the style and appearance of Mamluk coins occurs during the reign, once again, of Zahir Baybars, where this personal heraldic symbol of a large feline figure appears on the obverse side of the coin. What's very interesting about this particular coin, I lifted the image from the web. The source is from the British Museum online, but those of you who can see the inscription here, this coin was clearly minted in Cairo, Duraba bil Qahira. How someone read something else on this coin as Iskandariya is beyond me. The study of Mamluk coins began in the 18th century, but really took off in the late 19th century with the publication of 3 major catalogs of national collections, followed by additional catalogs from other countries in both the Middle East and in Europe. But of course, the British Museum catalog in 1879, the Bibliothèque Nationale in Paris in 1887, and 1897, the catalog of the Khedival collection in Cairo. But these were catalogs of entire collections, of which Mamluk coins were only a part. The number of published specimens in these catalogs was relatively low, and some of the coins lacked critical details. For example, the author of this one and this one, Stanley Lane Poole, a relative of William Edward Lane, who translated the Arabian Nights and also authored a still used Arabic-English lexicon. He never included the weights of copper coinage because he thought it didn't matter. However, the foundational work of Mamluk numismatics was published in 1964 and was by a man named Paul Balog. He established a typology of almost 1,000 different coin variants in this book. He subsequently added and corrected it in a long article 6 years later. And he drew upon almost 4,000 coins from many different institutions and private collections around the world. By the way, Balog spent several years as King Farouk's personal physician, lived in Cairo for many years. A major part of the Many of the coins in this were from his own personal collection, which, not surprising given the fact that he was living in Egypt, represents the Egyptian coinage far better than the Syrian coinage. It's important to stress, however, that scholarship on Mamluk coins did not end with Balog's work, even though I was told that very same thing back in 1991, early in my career. The man actually said to me, there's nothing more to do. We have Balog's work. This is not the case at all. It's important to stress that people have continued to publish Mamluk coins. And I think one of the two of the most important developments in the last 30, 35 years in Islamic numismatics was first the founding of the Forschungsstelle für Islamische Numismatik in Tübingen, the Center for Islamic Numismatic Research, and their publication of many volumes of siliges. A siligi takes all the coins in a particular institution's collection and presents them in chronological order by mint. So thus far, 3 different siligi volumes have been published which contain Mamluk coins. The first was Hama, relatively recently Egypt, and just I guess now 4 years ago, Aleppo. We are all desperately waiting the appearance of the second volume for Damascus, which will contain all the Mamluk coins in the Forschungsstelle für Islamische Numismatik. By the way, the Siligi Numorum Arabicorum is affectionately known as SNAT. And of course, scholarship on Mamluk coins continues and is ongoing. And I was recently made aware of this 2024 catalog of a private collection here in Kuwait. And there's about 760 or so coins that are published in these 2 volumes. And there are 58 Mamluk coins included. From my perspective, every new publication, when more new examples of Mamluk coins come to light, that is a win for all of us. Now, let's move to the third and longest part of my presentation here tonight. I will share first a few comments about the collection and then use some of its coins to illustrate some major changes and developments in Mamluk coinage. First of all, I think it's important to recall that the study of Islamic numismatics has been, from its very origins, reliant upon coins held in collections, whether institutional or personal. And this is certainly the case in Mamluk numismatic studies. Only recently, for example, have Mamluk coins excavated from archaeological sites begun to be integrated into wider numismatically informed studies. While archaeologists and numismatists often work together, it's taken a while for them to collaborate on situating the coins in a wider context than stratigraphy, in my experience. Now, the al-Athar al-Islamiyah has extensive holdings in Islamic coins and actually contains more than 5,000 specimens of Mamluk coins. As such, it is one of the largest collections of unpublished Mamluk coins in the world, if not the largest. To put this number in context, remember that Balog's coinage of the Mamluk sultans of Egypt and Syria contains slightly fewer than 4,000 coins. The Dar's collection also contains more Mamluk coins than those preserved in Tübingen, and the al-Athar al-Islamiyah collection is thus a major, important untapped resource for those interested in Mamluk economic and social and monetary history. One further set of comments about collections. When it comes to the aims and reasons for collections, there are as many of those as there are collections. As a result, the contents of coin collections are affected by many factors, among them collector interest, coin availabilities, age of the collection, activity level of acquisitions, etc. That said, to simplify the situation, I think you could be argued that at one end of the reasons for collecting spectrum, there is an emphasis on the rare, the unique, the beautiful, and or the valuable. At the other end of this reasons for collection spectrum, there is an emphasis on preservation and a concern for quantity. A benefit of this approach is that it recognizes that for some types of numismatic analysis, what is needed is more specimens of a known type of coin, even when that coin is common. This is the approach needed for metrological analysis, the study of weight standards or not, whether they exist or not, and die studies. Die studies is when you collect as many specimens of a known coinage as you can and carefully compare the dies used on one side, the dies used on the other side, how often they're used in combination, how often either one might be used with another obverse or reverse die, etc. And one of the reasons you would do this painstaking work is that from that data you can get an estimate of how large a coin supply was. It's not exact, but it's the best data we have because the Mamluk Sultanate left no records of coin production. And modern economic analysis is, of course, dependent on money supply analysis. And when we don't know how much money there was, we are a bit limited in what we can say. Okay, so there's no clear border between these two approaches, and both are important. In the case of the collection of the al-Athar al-Islamiyah, there are examples of extremely rare coins. There are dozens or even hundreds of specimens of common types, and there are coins which fall in between these two ends of the spectrum. There are several rare Mamluk coins in the Sabah collection. I do not have the time to share all of them with you, but I will share some examples. But first, I should acknowledge the key question of how does one determine whether a coin is rare or common? Aside from the personal experience and sense that comes from studying a coinage for years, there is actually a tool for establishing availability and scarcity, and it's this work. The third edition of a checklist of Islamic coins published by Stephen Album, a long time, decades-long dealer in Islamic coinage and a scholar in his own right. And in this book, he has this chart rating the availability, the commonness, or the rareness of a wide variety of categories, from abundant to extremely rare. This guide is based on the author's experience dealing in Islamic coins, and it is a handy reference tool for getting a general sense of how common or scarce a certain coin type might be. Although there is an important caveat to note, there is a difference between what is available in the market and what has been published and thus available to a wider audience for study. In my experience, for example, working in Mamluk coinage, there are some Mamluk coin types here listed in Album's checklist as common, but there may be only a handful of specimens which have been published. Here is an extremely rare coin in the collection. This is our first example of such a rare the rare coins I'm going to show. This coin is labeled as 2 R's, RR, in Album's checklist, which means it is very rare and that, quote, collectors may have to wait years to collect one. In my examination of public scholarship, only 9 other specimens were listed of this coin type in Balog's 1964 catalog. This might not be surprising, given that this unfortunate individual who was subsequently murdered by the Ottomans only reigned for a year and only from Cairo after the defeat at Marj Dabik in 1516. But I'd draw your attention to, even though the size distortion here, this coin is about the size of a thumbnail, even a little bit smaller, right? Whereas the lion dinar of Baybar seen earlier is significantly larger. It's 25 millimeters across. And this coin is thus very different from those ingot styles. The changes seen in this coin from the ingot style emerged about 100 years or so before this coin was minted. They occurred after a series of changes were attempted in the first 3 decades of the 9th and 15th century. The main point to make here is that as a result of these attempted changes, by 1425, by 829 of the Hijra era, a new gold type became predominant in Egypt. All ingot style coins ceased to be minted, and this style of smaller coin dominated the Mamluk marketplace for the remainder of the Sultanate. These coins were smaller, thinner, and lighter in weight, and most importantly, their weights were extremely uniform. It's unfortunate that the contemporary chronicles, which mention these new coins, they're often known as Ashrafis because the final successful version of these coins were minted during the reign of al-Ashraf Barzbai, thus Ashrafi. In the absence of chronicle explanations, the numismatic evidence becomes even more critical. Thus, every additional specimen known to us from these attempts to change the coinage in those first 3 decades is very important for us. This coin may not look like it, but it is an extremely rare silver coin of the very short-lived Sultanate of al-Mansur Uthman, who occupied the throne briefly after the death of his father, Zahir Jakmak. Coins of this type are also rated as R, and in this case, I have located just 3 other published examples. So it's even more rare than the last dinar of the last Mamluk Sultan. Unfortunately, as you can see, it is very badly preserved. It did not photograph well. You can learn more by looking at this coin in person than you can from this image, but it is indeed a coin of al-Mansur Uthman. It looks bad, and it may not collect collector interest, but it's an extremely valuable bit of evidence. As it turns out, looking at this silver coin, the same thing that we saw with the 9th and 15th century gold coins is seen in silver coins. Again, after some attempted changes in the first couple decades of the 9th and 15th century, subsequent coins from this century in the Mamluk Sultanate were smaller, lighter, thinner, different design, and in the case of silver, unlike in gold, where Ayyubid and Mamluk coins of all styles were remarkably high-quality gold, there's a change in weight standard with these coins. These new style, smaller, thinner, lighter dirhams were higher quality of silver. They're 90% silver and upwards, and the preceding ingot styles from the late Ayyubid period into the Mamluk period were usually of a blend of about 2/3 silver and 1/3 copper. The reasons for this is something we can clearly explore a little bit more in the question and answer period. So the next 3 slides I'm going to show you are silver coins related to a very different attempt to change the Mamluk gold coins in circulation. And all these coins date from the reign of Nasser Faraj again. Two of the coins are of one attempt, and the third coin is of a separate failed attempt to change the way dirhams circulated in the Mamluk Sultanate. This coin from the collection is a dinar of a Nasr Faraj. The mint and date are all flan. Flan is the name for the blank piece of metal that's struck with the dies to make a coin. And it is an unfortunate reality of Mamluk coinage that flans are always smaller than dies. So what we can reconstruct the full text of the die only by looking at various surviving specimens, by saying, okay, and there's some prediction as well. You know that they're usually going to be al-Malik and Nasr, Saif ad-Din, whatever, and you may only see Saif, but you know ad-Din is going to be there, etc. But it's a source of frustration, but what can you do about it? It's what it is. This coin is off flan, but we know from all the others, the mint is off flan, but we know from all other surviving specimens that it was minted in Cairo, Duraba bil Qahira. This coin is one of the few surviving examples of an attempt to restore gold dinars to an Islamic weight value of the mithqal. Now, the word mithqal does not appear on this coin, but all the coins of Faraj with this circular side and his name inside this circle represent this attempt. There is another example of a single mithqal coin, and we can tell from the date here, not from the date, but from the mass here, that other evidence has suggested that the value of the mithqal was a bit higher in the Mamluk period than the classical mithqal of the Umayyad period. But there's another example of this coin as well, and there is also an example of a 1/4, basically a 1 point something gram coin, a quarter mithqal in the collection. And then there is this coin, which is a 2 mithqal unit of gold coins. Now, I need to share with you that collectively, in an earlier study of these mithqal weight coins, I found only 11 specimens anywhere, Balog, Tübingen, etc., other collections. And now here we have 4. That's a significant increase in the sample size. This attempt to move to a mithqal weight standard also failed. But a few years later, the emirs serving Faraj tried again. But this time, they went a different route. These coins are often referred to as sequins or sequin-style dinars in the scholarship. The word sequin comes to us, by the way, through the Italian word zecchino, which is itself etymologically rooted in the Arabic word sikka. Fun little fact of the day. The issuance of these coins is commonly thought to be linked in some way to the increasing presence of Venetian ducats within the lands of the Sultanate. These coins, unfortunately, failed to replace the ingot style at all. Now, these coins have been described as scarce, defined as usually available without long delay, but hardly ever in quality. However, the number of published specimens of this type is actually small. Balog's catalog included only 19 specimens, and the Fint collection has published 2 more. The DAI collection, the Darb collection, has 6 of these coins, which represents, once again, there's a common theme here, a major increase in the available number of specimens of these coins. All right, Let's shift gears here a little bit. I want to turn to a final set of questions from the copper coinage. The first two coins I'm going to show you date from the end of the 8th, 14th century, but I believe have a relationship to the beginning of the 9th and 15th century. What do I mean by that? Well, it turns out that in Mamluk scholarship, there has been a long-standing question, occasionally a debate, over copper coinage in the last century of the Mamluk Sultanate. We have a central irony. The rich literary sources of the Mamluk chroniclers tell us of large numbers of coins in circulation. Almost a Weimar Republic sort of situation where people are, using large quantities of copper coins. However, the surviving numismatic base is incredibly small. Now, it's always a bad idea to base an argument on absence of evidence. Maybe something will be discovered. But in this case, the disparity between the literary evidence and the surviving numismatic record is astounding. All right? So I have been exploring the idea that perhaps we can shed additional light on this question by examining the Egyptian copper coins produced from the second reign of Nasser Hassan, one of which is seen here, minted in 759, through the second reign of Zahir Barkuk. The last coin of this style was minted in 1399. What is it that makes these coins unusual? Well, certainly not number, because these coins survive in the hundreds, if not the thousands. There are at least 1,000 of these coins in the Dar's collection. What's interesting about these coins, at least interesting to me, is that these copper coins were also struck to a Mithqal standard. The sources tell us this. Kalkashandi does, and a few others as well, tell us that this was a new reform under Nasser Hassan, and it continued for the rest of the century. Now, collectively, these coins were called in the chronicles the new fulūs, al-fulūs al-judud. Now, that's just a generic label. It could be applied to any copper coin of a new issue. However, in Mamluk sources such as Makrizi, that label, al-fulūs al-judud, referring to coins of this style, continues to be used well into the subsequent century. Clearly, these coins had some sort of impact on what happened even after they were ceased to be minted. Here is an example from the reign of Barkuk, from one of the later versions of this. And when you see something like this X tells us that while we can read the digits of 790, we cannot read the single year digit. But this is, a pretty poorly preserved coin as well, but yet the value of this is the fact that it's one of thousands. All right. So what I'm currently investigating is there another way to approach this dilemma of the 9th and 15th century? This apparent paucity of new copper coins. And what I'm exploring is the possibility that so many fulūs of this type were put into circulation. And I'm telling you, there are bags of this, I've been told, I've not seen, in the Egyptian National Library, containing many thousands more of these coins. Perhaps so many of these were introduced that they satisfied market demand for copper coinage well into the later century. This is something for which further research is needed, which is, of course, the standard response from many academics. But the third and the last coin I want to show you here also sheds additional light on this issue. This is a copper coin minted in Damascus in 801 of the Hijri, and coins of this type are marked by this object. This has been described as a chalice. Balog himself called it a fleur-de-lis chalice and pointed to an example he had in his collection of objects of a similar shape. But what's important for us here is that while Mithqal weight coins were being minted in Egypt, and also both in Cairo and in Alexandria, the copper coinage in the Syrian cities remained, for the most part, very light. And their weights are also scattered all over the place, but you don't encounter really heavy coins of most of these Syrian fulūs of the century. However, beginning in Barkuk's reign and continuing in the first couple years of his son's reign, these coins were struck, and we have no evidence from the chronicles that describes them whatsoever. In general, the Damascene chronicles don't have much to say about money in the Mamluk period. There are exceptions, but the evidence is that they were also extremely heavy, possibly minted to a Mithqal standard. Why they would have been minted to a weight standard is something we can discuss in the questions. I'm currently preparing an article for publication on these the coins of the Sultan Faraj from Syria, and in that work up to this date, I'd found 40 examples of these coins. Here alone in the Dar, there are more than 30 of them. So it's just doubled my sample size. In metrological analysis, more data is always better. So this is a welcome development, which I will be investigating further. So in conclusion, what I hope I've shown for you tonight is that while the basic outlines of Mamluk monetary history and the Mamluk monetary system are known, these examples drawn from the collection of the Dar al-Athar al-Islamiyah illustrate how making more coins available for study may reverberate through so many different aspects of numismatic analysis than just identification. Thank you very much for your attendance and your attention.